Today we're going to talk about Fujifilm X-H1's in-body image stabilization. Okay, hi guys, this is Dylan Golby. I'm just watching a wild boar kind of climb the mountain here and hoping that he doesn't make his way down here. Today we're going to have a chat about Fujifilm X-H1's in-body image stabilization. What it is, what it isn't, how it works, how well it works particularly, and kind of my experience with it, just to let you guys know. And also a little bit about what I'm hoping for in the future if Fujifilm can improve this a little bit. Alright, so let's start off with what is in-body image stabilization. Just like the optical image stabilization in your lenses, this is a system that will basically allow you to shoot at longer shutter speeds if you're shooting stills, but also keep your video quite smooth if you're shooting video. And the way that it does this, instead of moving an element inside of a lens, it actually moves the sensor. So the benefits of moving the sensor are basically that every lens is stabilized, and that means Fujifilm lenses. That also means non-native lenses. If you've got a mount converter on there and you're using old Leica glass or something like that, that will also be stabilized. Now, depending on which lens and sort of what information it's able to communicate to the camera, you're going to get differing levels of image stabilization, but Fuji has a table that will kind of show you that, and they explain that basically off-brand lenses don't communicate with the camera, they don't give distance information, so they can only do 3-axis stabilization, whereas with the Fujifilm native lenses, they actually have a CPU inside that will communicate with the camera and give it distance information, allowing it to make all sorts of different corrections and get you really up to 5 or 5.5 stops, Fujifilm says. So 5 to 5.5 stops, what exactly does that mean? Well, basically what that means is if you're confident at shooting a frame at a 250th of a second with a particular lens, and you know that you can get that sharp, according to Fujifilm, you can go 5 stops of shutter speed below that and still get a sharp image. Now, again, that depends on just how much shake there is, but in perfect conditions, that's theoretically what you can get. So let's go from a 250th of a second. We'll go down to 125th, that's 1 stop. 60th, that's 2 stops. 30th, that's 3 stops. 15th, that is 4 stops. And 1/8 of a second, now that's 5 stops. Now, I personally cannot get anywhere close to 1/8 of a second with something like the 56mm. I've been able to get down to about a 25th of a second and still get sharp images, but 1/8 is well out of the realms of what my hands are capable of. So for stills photography, you can see that it's going to give you much longer shutter speeds. Now, I mentioned the 56mm and not being able to shoot that beyond a 25th, but I've been able to do half-second and even full-second exposures with the 23mm f2 when I've got my elbows braced on something and I'm holding the camera like that. Really just breathe out, really steady. I'm able to get down to about a second. There's a couple of examples of that. I'll throw them up on the screen for you. So really it depends on the focal length as to how much you're actually going to be able to handhold along with your hands. So one thing that I found really good with the in-body image stabilization is actually just for composing your images. So if you're shooting stills and you're using a longer focal length, something like the 90mm f2, it's quite a long focal length, and small movements of the camera make actually large changes in your composition. And the Ibis, basically the in-body image stabilization, allows you to smooth those movements out, so it's almost like instead of sudden jerks of your pulse or your hands moving or anything like that, what it actually tends to look like is almost like the sway of a boat on calm water. So you're sort of moving slowly back and forth like this, and you're able to compose a lot more accurately with the in-body stabilization turned on. So I have it on continuous all the time, just because it allows me to get good compositions handheld. So in terms of what it does for video, now basically as you're shooting video, you might notice if you have it turned off or using something like the XE3, the XT2, an XT20, something like that, that every slight movement of your hands, every shake gets recorded in the video. Now the Ibis system is very good at minimizing those. So to the point where all you're going to notice is a slight sway of your body moving in the video. And that's, I mean, you can correct that in, or you can remove that basically in things like Adobe Premiere if you wanted to. But it does mean that your footage is much, much higher quality coming straight out of the camera. So the thing that I've noticed with video is that it works very, very well if you're trying to do a still shot, maybe a slow pan, maybe you're tracking just a little bit. It works really well for things like that. It also corrects really well for if you're, say, sitting in the seat of a car or a bus or something like that. It's really, really good to get smooth footage there. However, for sudden movements, things like walking, movements like that, they tend to trip it up. It tries to overcorrect for things. So you'll notice that, you know, footfall will actually jerk the camera quite significantly. So I'd always be looking to use a gimbal or, you know, something like a Ronin or something like that to get footage if you're actually going to be doing significant movements. Right, so in terms of sort of what it's good at, it's really great for smoothing out simple video footage. So if you're doing very, very simple on location stuff, run and gun, it's really, really good for that. It's also really good for shooting longer shutter speeds with stills, and it's really, really good for being able to compose your image perfectly when you're shooting stills. A couple of things that I found that don't work as well as I would like. The first one, of course, being, as I mentioned, that quick movements tend to get overcorrected for, and that could also be when you're walking. That tends to get overcorrected as well, and the camera sort of jerks up and down as you're shooting video. Of course, you know, you can work that a little bit in post-production, but you're going to lose some of your image on the sides as it crops in to correct for all of that. The other thing that I would like to see improved is being able to turn it on and off a lot more easily. Assign it to a button, put it in the quick menu, all those things that you can do with every other function in the camera, but you can't do with the Ibis. I'd love to have that built into the camera as well. Alright, so that's my overview of the Fujifilm X-H1's in-body image stabilization. If you've enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and of course, throw any questions down below. I'm happy to answer them. Thanks, guys!